Hello again, everyone. This is Paul. And you may be wondering what the heck am I doing with a cane again when this is not an impression video, but I'm actually using it as a metaphor for what's to come next. So, for the first time ever in my video series, I am actually feeling pretty pathetic as I'm filming this. Today has been a very discouraging day, and yeah, usually when I'm sad, I surround myself by sad music and I'll rewatch a bunch of really sad scenes from movies. And a lot of people might think, "Well, Paul, why don't you listen to something uplifting?" Well, the way I see that is it's kind of like a drug or a drink. You take the thing and then you feel better for a bit, but then when the sadness comes to get you, then you just feel worse because it's what's called numbing the pain. It's not taking it away. And speaking of taking away the pain, one of the instigators of the pain just texted me as I was filming this. Anyway, it makes the pain go away for a bit, but then it just comes back with a vengeance and you feel absolutely terrible. So for me, I say that's not a healthy approach. I need to feel sad about this. As much as I'd like to think that emotions don't influence me, every now and then I realize that emotions are something healthy. Something that God gave us for a reason. I mean, if Jesus could cry over his friend's death, so can we, right? So, to emphasize my point, happiness and positivity are not mutually exclusive. That's the title of my video, or something like that. We have to realize that in life, we can't expect, even if you're living the perfect, ideal Christian life, we can't expect everything to go perfect all the time. Yes, you've heard that from other motivational videos before. You've heard it with a nice soothing piano in the background. And I know I could probably present it way better. But it's true. There are days when I'm sad, but I'm still positive. I still say, okay, this is a minor setback. That doesn't mean that I've completely failed. It's kind of like in chess. You know, you might make a dumb move or two and you lose a piece on the board, but that doesn't mean you've lost the game. There are ways of making a comeback and taking what little remains you have of your army and overcoming the odds to win a tremendous victory. You could also say it's like Fire Emblem. You know, I've played every Fire Emblem game in North America since the series was ported over, and there have been some very tough battles, some battles where I've had like this really small army against huge odds, and I've overcome it. Sometimes I felt discouraged when maybe my numbers were getting overwhelmed or my favorite unit died, but I pressed on and I said, we need to do this. So I guess you could kind of say resetting, like most Fire Emblem players do, is kind of a cheap cop-out to we have setbacks, but we need to have an optimistic, forward-thinking approach. That if we have hope, which is one of the three, I forget the terminology, one of the three great virtues that St. Paul talks about, then life becomes easier to take, shall we say. I'm not saying that all of a sudden you're going to be skipping around and smiling all the time, because who does that? Let's be realistic. Who can honestly be like that all the time? But you'll at least have a different perspective on it. Let me give you a few personal examples of how I started getting in that mindset. I started looking back at a lot of the scenes in like movies and video games that would get me down before, and I tried to put a positive spin on them because I knew that now was not the time for grieving. Now was the time for proactivity. So I took the scene with none other than Rumpelstiltskin in it. The scene where he's it's not that I'm being emotional, it's that I don't want to spoil anything. That's why I'm pausing a lot, but most of my friends have noticed that when I'm very emotional, I do tend to be a bit choppy in my speech. But let's just say that Rumpelstiltskin is he's feeling very sad and betrayed and all that other stuff in season 4, and I empathized with him quite a lot. Even the whole dark side thing of him, like, we all have a dark side, right? But then I started re-envisioning the scene. Rather than Rumpelstiltskin is a failure, I saw it as, well, what if the person in the scene were to encourage him instead and take him on into paradise? Then all of a sudden the scene had new meaning. Or the scene when, if you've played Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, you know that when Phoenix first walks into the witch's court, he sees a young woman being put into a cage and then thrown into a pit of fire. And he's like, so this is the witch's court? Well, he says it with a different voice annotation than that, but you get the point. And I said, well, what if you see it as the cage is flying up like a rocket instead of flying down into a pit of fire, and then they're going up to paradise rather than being sent to the flames? Take something that's sad and learn how to make it something worthwhile. Now, how can we apply that in real life? Because you might be thinking, Paul, those are fantasies. You can do whatever you want in a fantasy. Well, let's take Jesus' death on the cross. Because I'm Catholic, of course I'm going to say something about Jesus. His death on the cross was a major setback for most of his followers because they didn't truly understand the messianic role that had been being prophesied to them for hundreds of years, maybe thousands if we didn't do the calculations right. But yet, Jesus kept telling them, do not be afraid. And that was actually the most repeated verse in the Bible. And so, yeah, Jesus died. That was sad. That was tragic. His disciples were anything but happy. But Jesus encouraged them to take heart. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Because if they saw things like he did, they would know that he resurrected from the dead. He saved them from eternal damnation. Even though it was something sad and that made them unhappy, they were still able to be positive because they themselves had the resurrection to look for. So even when Peter was dragged off to be crucified, I'm sure he wasn't happy to be crucified upside down. I mean, who would? That's excruciatingly painful. But he was positive because he had hope for a brighter future. He had the hope that he joined in his Savior's suffering and that he could move on to a more fulfilled life. And I know that's really hard to convey in a video, especially if some of you watching this aren't Catholic. Like, Paul, how is it that you can put so much faith into something that you can't see? Well, you could say that faith is kind of like the force of gravity. Now, when you walk off a steep edge onto like a really lower edge, no one told you that you're going to fall. You just instinctively know it. That's the same thing with faith. Faith reveals itself in extraordinary ways. And those ways are definitely different depending on the person. Like some people say that they see God through nature, like how the seasons come. And in the spring, everything blossoms. And then in the summertime, things start to get a little bit ugly. Then in the fall, like the trees start dying. And then in the wintertime, pretty much everything is just decrepit. And then everything just resurrects itself again. That's essentially life showing itself externally. We start out by blossoming, and then we go through the hot, scorching times. Speaking of which, it's almost summertime here where I'm filming, so how appropriate. We go through the scorching summer times, where we fall temptation to sin. Summertime is, people do objectionable stuff in the summertime that they don't really do any time of year. And they think that that's what pleasure is, that they think that that's what life is all about, is pleasure. But then the fall comes, and then they start to fade away. And then winter comes, and they're just totally buried in their sins and their troubles. And you might be thinking, well, Paul, what about those of us who are righteous? Well, the thing is, the analogy that could be applied there is that of a garden. Because even though you could say that the rain comes and then the rain evaporates as a way of taking care of the earth, there are still some plants that will require personal care. So if you go in a garden and there's one flower that you decide not to water as much as another, then that flower is going to wither up and die. You have to be able to take care of the flower. Just like, same thing with life in general. If you don't take care of yourself, if you don't do what's proper, then you're gonna wither up and die. Because life is not about pleasure. Life was never about pleasure. If life was about pleasure, then why is there still suffering in the world? But if life was all about suffering, then why do we still ask for hope? We ask for hope because there's a fundamental desire within each of us to strive for something better than what we are. There's not really too many people that I know of who can say, I'm totally content with the way that I am. Life is good, don't bother making it better. I think if we give ourselves a really deep examination of our conscience, we are well aware that somewhere within us we're not fully satisfied. You've got the rich people who are overloaded in cash, but yet they still say, I need more money, as if the money they have is simply not good enough for them. You've got some of the most gorgeous girls I've ever seen in my life that say, I'm ugly, and I need to lose weight. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me! How much more could you ask for? And I've fallen victim to that myself. That whole, this could be better kind of thing. And that's where Jesus comes in. He says, I have come so that you may live life to the fullest. And by fullest, he doesn't mean that he's going to make your life happy. And if that's why you think that I'm encouraging you to be a Christian, even better, a Catholic, no. No, 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 no. He's here to fulfill your life, not necessarily make it happy. And that's where I bring back to my original point. Happiness and positivity are not mutually exclusive. Just as we can always hope that there will be a springtime after a winter time, even though I actually love the winter, but for the sake of the average person, just go with it. We can hope that Jesus will put everything into perspective. He can help us look back at those times in our lives where we might have made mistakes or felt down, and we say, you know what? That makes sense now. That was part of the learning process. I even wrote a song called Praise You for My Broken Heart. Of all the bad timing, I could get a text. I even wrote a song called Praise You for My Broken Heart, where I told God that I thanked him abundantly for the rejections I've had and for the setbacks in life. It's actually on my channel. It's one of my earliest videos if you want to check it out. I don't usually say either, so that's saying something. So, setbacks in life are sometimes necessary in order to get towards the goal. It's kind of like climbing a mountain. You know, parts of it are going to be smooth, you know, when you've got the flat part, but then there are parts of it that are going to be a bit more of a challenge, and you might cut yourself, and you might fall. But sometimes the exertion is required to reach the destination. I mean, who honestly can turn into a perfectly healthy, worked out person without working out a lot? I know my brother who worked out insanely when he was like in his early adulthood. And he would say, like, there were days when the workout was just unbearable. But when he looks at himself now, he's like, it was all worth it. That's life. Life is kind of like one big workout. We have moments of pleasure. We have moments where we just feel like just giving up. But then we reach the destination, and then everything becomes worth it. And there are probably infinite analogies that I could give, but this video is already too long as it is. My apologies to that. But the bottom line is, if you ever have a day like mine where you just feel like you just feel like you're just total... I was playing Smash Brothers today, and I was trying to accomplish a goal in the crazy orders, and I kept seeing the word failure in giant purple lettering, which, to put it in perspective, purple is the color they clothed on Jesus before crucifying him. So anyway, seeing that a lot of the day was not something that was uplifting and positive. That was something that discouraged me. So what I ended up doing was I ended up customizing my name for my character, because you can do that in Smash Brothers, and I called my character Winner. And I told myself inwardly, I am a winner. I am a winner. And I even said that outwardly a few times. I ended up being 2 turns away from completing the goal by the end of the day. I surrounded myself with positivity, and even though I wasn't happy that I didn't end up fulfilling the objective, I was positive that I was getting closer. And that's how we can see our faith. Faith is going to have setbacks. Faith is going to have doubting times. Faith is going to have those moments where you might say, what's the deal with this Jesus guy? Is he just... He might be a figment of my imagination for all I know. But we have hope that Jesus will always try to bring us back. He will put things into perspective, and he will ensure that we are never alone, that our uniqueness will contribute to the good of the world, and we can always be positive because we know that through Jesus this world can be a better place. My only question is, what are we waiting for? So, to sort of wrap this up, because this video is getting ridiculously long, a lot of my friends say that my best preaching is done when I'm upset, so I'd certainly like to think that that's the case right now. So, if you agree with that statement, please mention that in the comments. That'll really encourage me to do more videos like that. And if you like the cane, stick around, mention that too, because I'll love any excuse to have this in a video. And until my next video, as I always say, my friends, keep the faith, stay epic, and stay positive. And God bless. Bye.